I'm Jade, and today I'm going to talk about the 5 reasons that your OCD isn't getting better. I'm going to talk about the things that held me back in my recovery and how I got through them. I'm sure that you'll be able to relate to a lot of them because a lot of the OCD sufferers I talk to have been through just the same things. A bit about me: I am a guest video contributor to this channel, and I have worked with OCD recovery on my recovery. And I suffered with extreme severe OCD for 17 years before I even knew what to do about it, what it was. And that's the biggest reason that I like being on this channel, is to give you what I didn't have. So I was very alone. I was very scared. And I think we should all celebrate the internet and the fact that we can now connect with each other. And there's never been a better time in history to have OCD than now, in the sense that I remember vividly back in the early 2000s, there wasn't really any internet presence. There certainly wasn't internet presence to help with OCD. And again, I didn't know I had it. So great time to be connected with you. Let's talk about the different reasons that people commonly aren't getting better from OCD. The first one, and the most common one, and one that I went through for 4 years, is having the wrong treatment for OCD. So it's pretty well known. And if you just do a simple Google, what are the treatments that are best for OCD, it's pretty undisputed that CBT therapy, cognitive behavior therapy, incorporating exposure response prevention, things like leaving the thoughts alone, doing the exposures, mindfulness often comes up. Those are all what are considered to be the best forms of treatment for OCD. This channel, we talk a lot about REBT as well, which is just really simply another form derived and born at the same time as CBT. So they sort of were born together and did slightly different things, but very connected. REBT is rational emotive behavior therapy. And what I applied to my recovery was the element of unconditional self and life acceptance, which has been game changing. So I was doing all of the CBT exercises, distancing myself from the thoughts, exposures, recognizing how OCD works, doing all of that stuff. And then when I learned about REBT and unconditional self and life acceptance and rational thinking as an additional component, it kind of like the jigsaw puzzle finally clicked. If you would like to know more about that, I did do a video on unconditional self and life acceptance, which hopefully can be linked in the notes on this video, because that talks in way more detail about it. You can also look at ocdrecovery.com. There's a page on that website about what it is, how REBT works, and that whole website actually is really great for that. So the wrong treatment. So what did I try before I ended up in the right place? Well, the first thing I tried was nothing, because from age of about 8 up until the age of 26, I was not even aware I had a mental illness. I thought I was a monster. I believed every thought I had. I thought I was despicable. I thought I was hiding who I truly was. I thought that I was going through life about to be caught for some awful thing I'd done sometime, not even knowing exactly what it was, but I just thought, I'm going to be found out. I'm living a lie. And it was the scariest thing to just always have in the back of your mind. And oddly, today I have positive memories of things that had happened, but it was always like every few minutes, like, yeah, but this, yeah, but this, yeah, but this. And it was always about running away from that. And so I used a little bit. I wasn't by any means an alcoholic, but I did used to do all week I'd overwork at work to avoid my thoughts, and then on the weekend I'd have quite a lot of drink to numb my thoughts, and then I'd have a good excuse then to stay in bed all day and sleep all weekend and hide from my thoughts. So my life looked normal to people in their 20s alongside me, but I knew, I was like, you're just hiding, it's all going to come out. I'd have a few days of calm and quiet and everything was fine, and then bang, no, straight back into it. But it was always there. It was crippling, and I'm talking like multiple panic attacks an hour. I'm not talking like, oh, panic attacks every now and then. I'm talking like life in utter terror, survival mode, 3 stone lighter than I am now. And I'm on the slim side, so like that was extreme weight loss because I couldn't eat. I couldn't, I was so disgusted by my thoughts. And so the first treatment that I tried, and the reason that OCD awareness needs to raise, is that when you don't know that you have OCD, you wouldn't research OCD. So, for example, I might have Googled, why am I having awful thoughts about harming someone? Or why do I think that I'm attracted to this person? Or whatever. I would be Googling what I was worried about and then going down a rabbit hole of articles and thinking it would strengthen this idea that I was a monster. So I first went to a therapist. I just looked for a therapist. Something had gone wrong in my marriage and we'd had a really bad time. It was all linked to OCD and ROCD, and there'd been this colossal breakdown in my life. And I said to my husband, let's go and speak to a therapist who can help us with this. And at the end of the session, she was like, thanks, I'll see you guys again if you think you need anything from me. Because I was just in a ball on the chair, just like shaking, like literally shaking. And she said, I remember it so vividly. This is like 2013. So this is literally a decade ago. This is the first time I ever spoke to a therapist, not about OCD because I didn't know I had it. And she said, are you okay? Because I couldn't get out of the chair. And I said, no, I'm not. And I remember the words I said, could I see you again in the meantime? Because I can't get through the day. And I remember everything had collapsed. I couldn't avoid anymore. I couldn't distract. My thoughts were real. Everything had closed in. And so I then entered into a treatment, which was essentially talking therapy, where we were trying to work out if my thoughts were real. What do you think of that? So that, this is the reason, that's the first reason why OCD isn't getting better for people, is that if you're using the wrong treatment, you can actually make it worse. So I was being encouraged to follow through with compulsions and figuring out if things were real. We would make lists about my values and my characteristics versus that of the feared person that I was, and why my fears wouldn't come true. It was the worst thing I could have possibly done. Now, it did make me feel better because I had been able to confess my thoughts, and then someone had been able to say, oh no, you wouldn't do that, or you wouldn't think that. And it just got really scary because at one point, I think we were talking about, what were we talking about? One of my many themes, but we talked about POCD. And at one session, she said, but Jade, you must know if you're attracted to children or not. And I had the largest breakdown I think I've ever had, because she was like, people know who they're attracted to. There just isn't, it's just automatic. And it was, obviously that's the worst thing you can say to an OCD sufferer. You need to be able to help them understand uncertainty and how things get jacked up when we're obsessing and focusing on them. And so it latched on tons of other themes as well. And it just was awful. So anyway, it just so happened that she couldn't treat me anymore at one point. I think she became ill. And I ended up in with a different therapist at the same place. And she was a CBT therapist. Okay, we were on the right track. I was with her for 9 months. We kept talking about my fears, in the sense of, I was like, I've got lots of phobias. After a few sessions, she was like, I've been talking to my peers and we think maybe you've got harm OCD. And that was the first time I learned I had OCD. So what else did I try before I ended up on the right path for OCD? I'd looked into things like deep breathing. I'd done a ton of avoidance. Avoidance is obviously just something that we try to make it go away, which just doesn't work. Things like mindfulness, they can settle our nerves, but they don't take away OCD symptoms. So I compulsively did yoga, which was great for my fitness levels, but I probably did 5 yoga classes a week consistently. And that helped me feel more rested and more mindful and more zen. And I did loads of mindfulness retreats, and I did a few 8-week mindfulness courses, which are so great from a normal life perspective, but I was doing them to get rid of the OCD. And that's not going to work. It's going to be helpful as part of the mix, as long as it's not compulsive like I did, but it's not going to be the ticket to getting better. So then, going down the wrong path. So the CBT therapy was great because I found out I had OCD. We started doing exposures. Unfortunately, when you don't have someone who understands OCD through and through, they miss things. And this is what happened. She was a wonderful therapist. I love her so much. But there were certain elements that were just missing. And even she would say to me, I'm struggling with this bit. So it would be things like, okay, if you get an upsetting thought, maybe you could do a handstand or something. And I was like, sounds like a compulsion. It was like, yeah, maybe. And so I became really unsettled because I was like, if you're not sure, I don't feel sure. And I think this is something that holds people back from getting better in OCD is when, if the therapist is unsure, or a member, she used to flinch if I talked about certain fears, and I think, oh, I've disturbed her. So, wrong treatment. There's also things like, I think, healing therapy. Say you've got your OCD is latched to, oh, I've got trauma. I would need to, be a therapist for once or a life coach and understand this in more detail. But my understanding is that I have been led to want to have healing type therapy where it's like, oh, we need to look into your trauma and your childhood because it's all interconnected and your fears. But that's definitely, from my OCD, not the right path. I have experienced trauma in my life. I have had difficult things happen, but that's not a good place for me to go with my OCD. I've noticed even when I scroll TikTok, how it can suck me in. Like, your problems in life are due to your childhood and the trauma you faced, and this is what abuse trauma looks like, etc., etc. And it just isn't the right direction in general for recovering from OCD and stopping compulsions and stopping obsessing. Okay, so making sure that you're having the wrong treatment is the first one. The second one is you're still engaging in the thoughts. So a lot of the time people can say, well, I don't have compulsions. I just have thoughts. There's no compulsions to go with them. And yet most of us know about this idea of, some people call it pure OCD, which is, it's just mental rumination is the compulsion. I think that because it's not physical, like locking the door over and over, or checking that the straighteners have been turned off, or doing something that is a physical outward compulsion, I think people don't take them as seriously. I don't know if that resonates with you, but I think sometimes people can do them a lot more sneakily. And at the end of the day, it's your own brain. Like, if the task is do not check the lock on the front door, it's like, right, it's going to be horrifically difficult, but we're going to stay in our room and we're not going to go near the door. We're not going to do it. It's like a physical stopping. Your brain is your brain. And it's like that 24-hour a day access and availability. So I empathize with how hard it is, but we're sneaky with it. And I think sometimes we pretend we're not doing it. We go for a sneaky little diagnostic so we can get that reassurance fix. And we're thinking, oh, I'll just engage in it for a minute. Or I'll just read one more forum blog where someone has said they've got the same symptoms as me, and then there's people telling them they're not a bad person. I'll just chat to some people who've got OCD like me, and we can make each other feel better that we're not alone. That's all part of it. It's not about not being around people who have been through the same. Like, I'm still in an OCD recovery WhatsApp group that I used a lot when I was really in recovery. I don't particularly use it now. Like, if someone else needs help in there, if I've got time, I'll hop in and I'll give them some suggestions. But typically, I don't have that much time, and I might have a bit of a banter with one of the boys in there. But that's about it. But that was a really good component of my recovery, was that it was a place where it was supportive and people were going through the same journey, but they were not under any circumstance going to reassure me, and they were not going to feed into things keeping me sick. And I think if we can recognize that, if you are an OCD sufferer and you decide to reassure another OCD sufferer, oh, don't worry, you'd never do that, or don't worry, your kid would never get sick, they're going to be fine, don't worry about it, or do you know what, just check with the doctor just in case. It is like giving a small amount of drugs to a recovering drug addict. It is the same. It's not, I'm not saying that you're an awful person doing it. It's just, we have to take it seriously that we're making someone stay sick, rather than saying, look, I can see how hard this is for you. I really care about you and I have your best interest at heart, and I'm not going to give you what you feel you need because I know it's not going to help you. Like, please go back to your recovery plan, and you can do this, and I believe in you so much, and I've been there. That's the type of support I got. Not, oh, it's okay, you're going to be, it was like, well, no, it is hard. It's difficult. It's not going to be easy, but you're strong and you can do this. That's the type of support we need. So reading forums, I did this so much, not forums so much. Maybe it's because I'm older, I didn't really grow up with forums. I don't know. But reading articles, I would constantly research the different themes and ROCD, POCD, harm OCD, I would constantly research them and read stories from other mums or other women who'd been through what I'd been through. And I'd be like, yes, that's it, that's me. It's just OCD, it's just OCD. And that cycle of, it's not me, it's OCD, keeps us stuck. Once we've gotten to that point, we've gone some way, but that is keeping us stuck. So if you're struggling to get better from your OCD and you are still doing those things, they need to go. I know it's hard. Okay, number 3 is, I did this for ages. And it's making me want to like breathe out and relax as I talk about it now, because it reminds me of the feeling of doing this. It's like, just breathe out. So when you're doing exposures, obviously we're really scared. So if you do an exposure, for example, I don't know, you are scared that you have a fear of knives because you've got harm OCD and you have terrifying intrusive images of harming your family. And so an exposure might be to use a very sharp knife cutting vegetables next to a loved one. I don't know, that might be the exposure. And what you do throughout is you have gritted teeth. Your abdomen is really tight. And you're white knuckling. That's what they call it, white knuckling. You're trying to get through it. That's the opposite of what exposures are meant to be, which is welcome everything in. It's like, I'm not doing this just to get through it, to then get to the other side and go, oh, see, it was fine, I'm fine. That's not what an exposure is. An exposure is going into it, knowing it's going to be terrifying. You might have bodily, physical sensations. That could be, urges. You could feel the rising sense that you're going to do something that you don't want to do. You might feel like groinal responses if it's in relation to one of the sexual-based OCD themes. You might start having panic attack, so that rush of energy. You might be like thrown into rumination. And so it's like being willing and getting to the point in your suffering that you're like, nothing's worse than this and living like this. So I'm going to be motivated to get better no matter what it takes. And that's what it took for me. I didn't do exposures properly until about 3 years ago. I was doing little exposures here and there. And I used to ask, have I done enough of that exposure? And it's like, no, because if you're still scared of it, you haven't done enough. Exposures need to be like you're living like it's normal life. So say you're terrified of going to a swimming pool because you've got POCD and it's a summer day and it's really terrifying. It's the most, when I was doing exposures, that was the most terrifying thing I could ever imagine. I love doing that now. I love going swimming with my kids. So you don't go in white knuckling, just get through it, everything's going to be fine. You've got to relax into it. You've got to act completely normal. You've got to let everything rush at you. You've got to not try and push it away. And the more and more and more that you do that, those sensations start to fall away. So try not to assess and analyze why anything's feeling any certain way. Just do the exposure, get it done. Don't overthink it. Let your body and your mind do what it wants to. So white knuckling exposures is a big one. Number 4 is coasting and avoiding things because you don't want to go back to where you were. This happened for me. You start to get a lot better and then you're terrified of losing that small joy that you've gained. So you're not 100% well, but you're certainly not where you were when you were really bad. And this happened for me. I was enjoying living normal life so much. I wasn't necessarily happy and fulfilled and over it, but I could survive. I could go for a massage and not have to run out halfway through because my intrusive thoughts and I was going to be throwing up. I could rest. I could watch Netflix. I could go for a walk without being consumed with thoughts. But it wasn't happy. It was still, oh, it could come back. So I was coasting. I didn't truly believe that it could get better. So I think there was part of me that was scared to do any more. It's like, what if I wake the sleeping lion? What if I wake the sleeping lion? Yeah. What if I wake the sleeping lion and everything goes back to what it was? So we get scared to lose the small amount of happiness that we've gained. And then we stay still. And then actually you go backwards after a while because you're not doing the work. And so it just starts to unravel. This is a really common place to be. And I zigzagged with this for maybe almost up to a year. When I was starting to get really loads better, after doing all that CBT, I got about 60% better, and then it wasn't really working. There were certain elements missing. And then once I started working with OCD recovery on one-to-one coaching and the WhatsApp groups and going on the webinars, I got like 80% better. And I was like, this is unbelievable. But I worked so hard. I can't stress enough how hard the work is. And I don't say that to put you off. I say it to give you motivation that if you've started something, like say you've read a couple of the books on the reading list and you're still not better, it will be because you haven't gone at it hard enough. You just haven't. And I'm not saying that to be judgmental. I'm just saying what I did. Like I lost belief 4 or 5 times throughout the journey where I really dipped off and was like, this isn't going to work for me. This isn't what it is about. The simple reason why unconditional self and life acceptance does work as the final piece is that it just makes basic sense. If you boil it down to this with OCD, you're scared of something. So no amount of exposing yourself to something you're scared of, if you're fundamentally deeply scared of it, you can be put in front of it loads. But if you're still scared of it, if you've got irrational beliefs about it, like, yeah, it's like face your fears. Yes, to a brain without OCD, more and more you do it, you're going to see, oh, there's nothing to be afraid of here. But if you truly believe deep down, what if I could murder someone? Being around knives all the time and getting used to using them is only going to show you that you're not acting on it, but you're still going to have that part of your brain going, yeah, but what if it's because you're just controlling yourself? So the reason unconditional self and life acceptance really works is, and rational thinking, it's a process for learning to not fear the things that you currently fear. Like if you've got health anxiety and you're terrified of vomiting, that, oh, if I eat too much food, I'm going to vomit and it's going to be awful. Well, exposures around vomiting, like I heard of one of like standing over the toilet and pouring a can of beans in or something and making retching sounds. That would be the exposure. So yeah, you're getting used to the idea and the physicality of being sick, but you still have a deep-rooted belief that being sick is really bad and really terrible. So we have to work on that belief. So it's not engaging in disputing your thought, it's engaging in disputing the core fear. Why is that so scary? What is it I'm terrified of? Like for me, with my eating, it was always, I would always be terrified of, what if I can't eat and then I lose more weight and then everyone just looks at me all the time and comments on my weight all the time? And people always say, you know, you need to eat more, like what's wrong? You're slim enough, you don't need to lose any more weight. You look awful, you look too thin. And it almost made it worse, me not eating, because there's so much pressure on me to eat. Whereas if I could work on unconditional self and life acceptance, it would say, well, you can survive even if every single day people are commenting on your body. You've got an irrational belief that says that life's unbearable if that happens. So once I could let go of that and I was at peace with someone saying, hey, you're too thin, and me going, yeah, I think I probably am. Well, why aren't you eating? Yeah, sometimes I struggle with anxiety and I don't have much of an appetite. Like, where else can they go? You know, there's nothing else they can do. And so my family might be really worried about me and they may be like concerned. And it's like, well, that's very livable. And it's applying that to different areas of life, things that we making peace we don't want. Obviously, I didn't want to be severely underweight and be commented on all the time, but I'm having a healthier response to it. So this fear of going back to where you were before is a really common one, and it's definitely can be a reason that you're being held back. The first thing is that you can't really ever go back to square one, because if you've moved forward at all, you've made progress. And so you'd always be able to train your brain like weightlifting again to get back that muscle memory. And so there's no going back. And I also think it's like the life mission thing. It's like, what do you want from your life ultimately? I don't want to be getting to 75 and thinking that I spent my whole life doing compulsions and it will take 10 years like that. 10 years will just go and you're like, look at that, another 10 years of my life has been taken. There's no joy in it. Like, I'm looking at the sky now, I want to get out there into the world. I'm not feeling trapped in my house and like, oh, I don't want to go out, it's scary. I'm like, I wish I could get out there. My baby's napping, I'm stuck in the house, so boring. But when she gets up, we're getting out there and it's like the world is fun again. And so, number 5, the last one I'm going to leave you on is, this is a hard one to say, okay, because it's like, it's going to really annoy people. You've not really gone for it. This is so common and I did it for ages, and that's why I feel like I'm allowed to say it, because I did it. you've not really, really, really gone for it. Like you feel like it's not worked for you. Oh, I did that, but it didn't work. I did this, but it didn't work. I once heard an influencer in the OCD world say, oh, I tried exposure therapy, but it's not really for me, and everyone's journey is different. And I was a bit like, you can't just say that. You can't say it's not right for everyone, because I mean, it was essentially saying I didn't like it, I didn't enjoy it, it wasn't nice. Well, of course it's not nice, it's awful. And we can understand and sympathise with why so many people in their life will never even entertain doing an exposure. I know people in my network, in my community, who I just know in normal life who have OCD. They don't know they have OCD. I've mentioned to them it could be OCD. I've said, I know how you could get better. Just research OCD and exposures and start there and ask me anything. Oh, no, I would never, no, I'm not doing that. Absolutely not. And that's that. They're not like even looking at it for a second. We have to understand that it is terrifying doing exposures. When I was at my worst, like as in when I was doing recovery the most like intensive program, which was about 2019, I was crawling out of bed in the morning. I couldn't believe I had to do another day. I couldn't believe I had to do another day where I was going to face those fears. And I'm talking intensive. It was intensive, but it was needed. And it's not dangerous to do exposures. You know, you're just doing normal life things that other people aren't scared of. It just feels absolutely terrifying. Like if I was told, right, bath your kids every day this week and go swimming 3 times a week and go to the play park twice a day, whatever, I might have come up with that myself. It just felt like unlivable, but it had to be done because I wasn't going to push through it. It was so intense and it was so extreme. It had to be full on. And I think a lot of people, they do a few weeks of exposure and go, oh, I'm not getting better. If you've had years and years and years of avoidance and suffering and terror, it's going to take a lot more than we imagine and a lot more than we want. And I had like 6-month breaks where I was just exhausted and didn't do it. But I think we have to get to the place where we are so motivated to recover that we are quite literally willing to do anything. And I think that's the mindset, is like getting that grit. And that I almost had fury. And it was when I had children, it was like, I am not missing their childhood. I am not living like this. I'm not doing it. And it was like a fire in me. And I think maybe we need to tap into that. We need to get, write your vision for your life. What do you want your life to be like? What did you want it to be like when you were a kid? I always had this thing about art, and I just love expression and art and creativity. And I'm like, am I living that version of myself that my childhood person would have been proud of? Am I truly that person? Am I out in the world showing up in the way that she wanted me to? And where the answer is no, it's always because of fear. It's always because of fear. And so that for me is like, that's what forced me to jump into the fire. And I always say it, but one of the other mums that was really helping me at the time, Erica, she always said, you have to jump into the fire. And it was like, oh my God, that's exactly it. Like, that's how it feels. So it's an exposure you're putting off. Jump into the fire. It's not like, oh, come on, you can do it. You're going to be okay. It's like, jump in the fire. Get on with it. Do it. Very, like, we're tough. We're not weak. And I think sometimes in the OCD world, the language and the way we talk, the way people talk about OCD keeps us in that place, because it's like suggesting that we're weak. But it's the absolute opposite. People who don't have OCD, if they lived a day in our suffering in our brain, I think they would actually collapse. And I know this for guaranteed certainty, like as far as you can. I have a friend whose life is everything you would want when you're in the worst place in OCD suffering. Her life is just carefree. She's like an ocean breeze. She's got no cares. And I know her so well that this is true. She would tell me if otherwise. She's in the happiest relationship you could imagine. She had a beautiful childhood. She has a beautiful home. She's really fulfilled in a career that is 100% in line with like her inner loveliness. She is fulfilled in that the role that she has in her job is like helping others. She buys all the things that she loves and wants. She has amazing friends around her. I'm so happy for her, by the way. But we were in a situation once that, for anyone who had seen what had happened, we saw something really unpleasant happen. Now, I was no stranger at the time to emotional distress. I was no stranger to feeling very disturbed, very upset. She fell to pieces. Her brain melted. She could not hack what had happened. Whereas to me, it was a familiar territory. And that, my friends, is kind of like evidence. And it doesn't matter. We don't need to think this, but I want to tell you that because I want you to realize you're strong. When a person like that says to you, why are you being so anxious about that? It's no big deal. That would never happen. It's a load of rubbish what they're saying because they don't know your reality. They think that you're being anxious about getting food poisoning in the same way that they would. So they're like, don't worry about it. What are you on about? If they lived in your brain, I can almost guarantee they would absolutely collapse. And I wish they would do a VR on that at some point. Like, how cool would that be with like AI, get therapists or people who have to help mental illness sufferers to like experience the mind for an hour. Just another trail of thought. But remember, having OCD makes you a very, 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 very strong person, not a weak person. So we've got to start building each other up and using language that strengthens us and shows us how strong we are. We're strong even if we're stuck in bed for 3 weeks, because even sometimes being alive feels like a struggle. You laying in bed for 3 weeks, which I don't recommend, is not the same as someone who isn't suffering with their mental health laying in bed for 3 weeks. It isn't lazy. There's stuff going on for you. So I hope that's been useful. And if you have any questions, please write them below because I do regular Q&As and I'm always looking for topics for videos. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you like this, I'd love a like as well. And have a lovely rest of your day. Bye.